Hi, this is Bruce Rawles. I'm speaking today with Lorri Coburn, who is a fellow course student and a longtime enthusiast of the pure non-duality of A Course in Miracles. And we thought we'd talk about that today. So welcome, Lorri. First off, your website is lorricoburn.com, LORRICOBURN.com. And some great videos there and some information that course students would find helpful and useful. And anyway, thanks for being here. We actually met, I think, at Estes Park, about 5 years ago,
Yeah.
at a course conference, and yeah, that was a lot of fun. Yeah, I enjoyed meeting a whole lot of people there, and it was great fun. It seemed like we even did a little hike with a handful of folks too. That was
I
fun.
think we did. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, so yeah, let's talk about non-duality, because that is such an important idea in A Course in Miracles, and it really is at the heart of what makes it all work. Because without that, the course just kind of devolves into just another metaphysical set of theories that doesn't really get anywhere. It would seem.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think we need to define non-duality first, because different teachings define it differently. For example, a lot of people call non-duality embracing the physical world as something that God made, and say that, well, if you exclude the physical world, then you don't have non-duality because you're separating. The Course doesn't say that. The Course flat out says God did not create the physical world. And so the pure non-duality of the Course is different. It's closer to Advaita Vedanta, Taoism, or I don't know about Taoism and physicality, but anyway, the Course does not teach the same thing as a lot of metaphysical paths that it's lumped in with, lumped in with metaphysics, lumped in with New Age, but it really is very strict on saying, no, the physical world is a complete and total illusion. Not just how we view the physical world, because a lot of people who also call themselves non-dual, in their definition of non-duality, it's like, well, but it's all one. All the opposites, all the different seemingly separate things are all one, and that's why it's non-duality. A Course in Miracles says all form is non-existent. It's a projection from the mind. It's the mind only formulation of the world. And so it is different than a lot of paths.
Yeah, that's a very important distinction, because and I think that's at the heart of so much of what has been called level confusion in the Course. Because if we think in terms of the world is real, but it's not, well, okay, we're still mixing two thought systems, aren't we? Yeah.
Right. And that's really, really important. Yeah.
And at the same time, the Course doesn't suggest that we stop doing all the normal things in the world, like going to the doctor, brushing your teeth, paying your bills, stopping at intersections, waiting for the light to change, just kind of common sense, everyday stuff that would be kind of foolish to not do those things. And, just everyday politeness, courtesy, and getting along in the world. But at the same time, I think it suggests that more and more, as we apply the Course's non-dual metaphysics, we take it less and less seriously as an identity. And I think that identity is such an important thing. Does that kind of jive with what you've studied? You also, part of the reason that we're having this conversation today is I have been attending some classes, study groups that Jamie Brandt has been doing, and Lorri gave a wonderful couple of presentations on non-duality, and so I thought, well, this would be a perfect opportunity to talk further about this and share this with a different audience. So thanks.
Yeah, and I agree with you. The Course doesn't deny our needs in the world, but it says that its goal is peace of mind, and that the only way we're going to get peace of mind is to wake up to the fact that we're dreaming this world, because there's nothing in the world that's ever going to make us happy. And the proof of that is when you get something you've always wanted, are you happy? No. You're only happy if you're centered in love and centered in peace And the Course would say, that's about letting go of the ego thought system, or letting go of the identity with the body and the personality. And I found that in my life and in a lot of people I know, the more they let go of their ego hooks and the things they're attached to in the world, the more they actually enjoy the world. I enjoy the world way more than I ever used to, because I was in so much anger and hatred in the past. And now I'm in so much peace that I can just be happy, but be awake to the fact that this body is a character in the dream, as are all the other bodies, as well as all the other forms like trees and buildings and stuff. They're all just props in the dream.
It's a pretty sophisticated holographic movie, isn't it?
Yeah.
And as you're talking about, the dissatisfaction in the world, and the, I'm going to probably quote, as I often do frequently, from Ken Wapnick, who's my favorite course teacher, and probably that's true of a lot of people. One of the things that he says is that it can be really helpful information to notice, when you're upset about things, and just see, what's upsetting you, and to not judge yourself for being for judging. And one of the things that you were just mentioning, as far as being upset with the disappointments, like I guess the cliche that came to mind just as you're saying that is, a kid opening a Christmas present, and then somewhere between 30 seconds and 30 days, usually closer to the 30-second mark, the toy either breaks or becomes abandoned out of, like, okay, I'm done with this, now what, kind of thing. And then you start playing with a box, and then the box finally gets too shabby to even keep around. So the box that it came in, kind of thing. But that's kind of the standard modus operandi of everyone's egos. We have special relationships with everyone and everything in the world, and then at some point we just say, hopefully we start to generalize and realize that, well, it's not the specific thing. It can never be a specific that is our source of happiness. It really has to be beyond the specific, and that's when we start to learn the generalization that the Course leads us to. And so
yeah. Well, and one of the lessons in the Course is lesson 127, there is no love but God's. And when I first read that lesson, I was offended, because I thought, no, the love that I have with my soulmate is way better than other kinds of love. And then as I let go of my specialness around certain people, now as I look back on the different relationships I've had, the many, many friends I've had, it's like, I love them all, and it's all the same love.
Yeah. And that's the generalization, isn't it? To see that there really is, behind the facade of form and appearances. And I also appreciate very much the fact that in the talk that you gave over a couple of Fridays about non-duality, you referred to Plato, who's one of my favorite historical figures for multiple reasons, not the least of which is he sort of is one of the pillars of what's become known as sacred geometry, which he's the one who's credited with discovering the Platonic solids, of which there are 5. But and then of course the famous allegory of the cave, which talks about how we're all just seeing shadows, and it's sort of like we're all manacled, facing the back of the cave, and all we can see is the light that's casting shadows from the what we think we are on the back of the cave. And so we get a dim and distorted view of, at best, of reality. And the only thing that really seems to make a difference is when somebody way behind us walks in front of the cave and interrupts the light a little bit. But we had, when someone finally realizes that the manacles are flimsy and breaks free, and says, "Hey, come on, let's all get out of the cave." We're so attached and invested with that sense of limitation, because we actually think that our specialness is getting us somewhere and delivering some kind of benefit, that we don't realize that beyond just the initial taste of generalization, that there really is a non-changing, non-dual piece that is beyond anything we could possibly imagine. And
right.
Yeah.
Right. And one of the things about Plato is that he talked about ideal forms.
Yes.
And he didn't mean form in terms of physical matter. He meant an idea. And I was benefited from Christian Science, which is very similar to A Course in Miracles in that they do not put any reality or substance in physical matter whatsoever. And that is how they do these healings, because it's all mind and it's all a projection from mind. And I always had a hard time with, well, trees and flowers and body parts. And they would talk about the idea of a perfect knee, or the idea of a perfect tree, or some, I've got a spider right there. Perfect spider in my head.
That's fun.
Oh, that's really weird. I don't know what that means. I look for symbolism. It's like
we're all interconnected. It's the web, right? So
I guess it's the web spider coming down on my head while I'm doing this. This is weird. Anyway, the perfect spider or the perfect hand, and that helped me to understand the perfection of God, because I couldn't understand, wait a minute, how could God come into form? And the Course says God did not come into form. Christian Science says God did not come into form. Advaita Vedanta says the same thing. But many, many other spiritual paths spiritualize physical matter and say God did create form and God is in form, which is pantheism. But that is not what A Course in Miracles teaches.
Exactly. Yeah, and that is such a crucial point. I remember having picked up the Course finally in the mid 80s, having had it in my environment for a number of years before that. I finally opened the books in the mid 80s, but it really wasn't until 2007 that after having studied it for a few years that I came across Gary Renard's first book. And one of the two ideas, one of which was that the importance of forgiveness was one of the things that just kind of like, oh, wow, I got to go back and read the Course in earnest and really see how much forgiveness is crucial. But the other thing that somehow I managed to, blinders on, neglect, was this idea that God had and has and will never have anything to do with materiality, space, time, form, individuality, anything that has to do with duality. And I liked how the word duality is kind of a clue in the word individuality, since it's embedded in that word, is kind of a hint, like, okay, if I think I'm an individual, I'm still barking up the individuality duality tree. But
Right.
the idea that God has nothing to do with what can change actually is very comforting. And then that's when I really realized, okay, that's what I've been looking for all this time. My study of what's become known as sacred geometry was really kind of a predecessor to that, because I thought, well, Plato's shapes that are symbols of ideas that don't change, as you were alluding to. So I'm glad you brought that up, because I was going to go there next with Plato. That the idea that there really is a perfect essence, a perfect idea that really is our true nature, and that we all share that. And that essence, really, you could call it spirit, you could call it whatever you want, but there's an unchanging awareness, presence, being. There would be all the stuff that's in truth, love, the things that are above the line in Ken Wapnick's metaphysics chart, if anybody has that in mind. That's what I think we're all looking for. We all really want to return to that and think that we somehow have messed up royally and can't get back there. And that was the other thing that when I first started reading the Course, the non-duality really is the bedrock of the difference between sin and error. And that was one of the things that was one of these aha moments for me when I first read the Course. It was like, oh, sin you can't forgive because it's unredeemable, unforgivable. But error is just like, oh, I've driven into a cul-de-sac. I can just turn this thing around and get back on the thoroughfare. Get out of this little. I sometimes I think of our lifetimes in space and time as like a Gilligan's Island. It was supposed to be a 3-hour tour, but we took it a little too seriously. And how many lifetimes?
Yeah. And got in the storm. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the thing about the ideas is the Course tells us that we are a thought in the mind of God, because thoughts and ideas they're formless, so they don't die. Whereas it also says that death is an idea, but it's an idea in the ego thought system, which is the illusion, which is the false, the false ego self, the false ego world, the illusion. And so that what the Course says, we can never be born and we can never die. We're an eternal thought in the mind of God. So one of the ways that the Course became absolutely real, not in my head. I mean, I knew it for years, and you know how we know things intellectually for years, but then they go in and we've got it, was when my first husband, he passed away last year, and I couldn't, and we had been divorced for many years, so he wasn't in my daily life, and I was actually shocked at how much it affected me. But what it was I couldn't wrap my mind around how such a strong, healthy, virile person could be taken down by a brain tumor. And then I got to the place of knowing, wait a minute, he was never born, he's never died. He was always a thought in my mind. This is a character in the dream that appeared to be married to that character in the dream, but that was all the dream. The love, the Son of God that we are is an eternal thought, never separated, never came into this world to be born, to marry certain people, to have babies together, etc. And that was how it just kind of went in finally, where it's like, of course, he's always been with me. He will always be with me. He's a thought in my mind. He was never a body. And somehow it just became real.
Yeah, that's a great example. And I think I could probably find it fairly quickly with the web edition search function. There's a place in the Course that talks about how, one of the strangest beliefs that we have is that we can lose those that we love, which to me is just a further confirmation of what you were just sharing, is that, that what we really are can never be lost. The who comes and goes, and it changes shape and form, and with or without the idea of reincarnation. I mean, just within one lifetime, we go from this little speck to an infant to a freckly kid or whatever to this the seeming mature adult to something that eventually becomes dust again. And if that isn't an exercise in illusory identification, what else is, right?
Right. And one of the things the Course says is God is changeless. So God could not create the changeable.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And in the manual number 27, it's called What is Death? And it says in there, Son of God, don't allow any compromise in which death plays a part. So the Course takes the idea of death and says it is a completely false thought. And this entire world with all its change, everything being born, everything dying, that's why it's an illusion. And because a God of eternity could not create death. But also in that manual number 27, it says, you will attempt 1,000 compromises and 1,000 more. And that's where I make the distinction between what I would call the qualified non-duality and the pure non-duality. The metaphysics and the paths that say God is in all the form and God created form, I call qualified non-duality. I got that from Vivekananda. That was his term. Because again, that's the pantheism, but it's not the pure non-duality of A Course in Miracles. And I needed that distinction. I know a lot of people, they need that stepping stone belief of God is in form, God made the world. Because I know when I first read that, what? God didn't create the world? It was like, what? But once I started actually investigating the idea, it answered every single question that I ever had.
Exactly. Yeah, it really does, because that's really the only foundation upon which any sustainable peace is possible. Yeah. Would you like me to read some of that from section 27? I looked it up really quickly, because I think it really is quite excellent. This is paragraph 7 in section 27 in the Manual for Teachers. And it says, Teacher of God, your one assignment could be stated thus: accept no compromise in which death plays a part. Do not believe in cruelty, nor let attack conceal the truth from you. What seems to die has been but misperceived and carried to illusion. Now it becomes your task to let the illusion to be carried to the truth. Be steadfast, but in this, be not deceived by the, quote, reality, unquote, of any changing form. Truth neither moves nor wavers nor sinks down to death and dissolution. And what is the end of death? Nothing but this, the realization that the Son of God is guiltless now and forever. Nothing but this. But do not let yourself forget it is not less than this. So there's our charge, isn't it? There's our assignment on an everyday level. And I kind of relate to what you were sharing a few minutes ago about how, we get it intellectually sometimes first, and then we get it more experientially when it really sinks in. Mm-hmm. And I think that willingness to just let it sink in a little deeper each time and let the ideas that the Course is sharing with us, really, immerse ourselves in them, and that not forgetting that it's less than this, I think, is really realizing if there's anything that I'm doing that's the least bit cruel or mean-spirited or unkind to myself or anyone else, whether it's just the slightest judgment of anyone or anything, there's my classroom on a silver platter. there's my opportunity to see where I've been limiting myself. A metaphor that I find helpful is like we're a hot air balloon that's ready. It's got plenty of buoyancy in the balloon that's all full and ready to lift us off. But we've got all these ropes that are tied around the basket that seems to be stuck on the ground. And we've made all of them. We've made all those tie downs. And I think what's requires the patience in letting go of the dualistic thinking is being willing to recognize that every time I forgive a grievance or a judgment or an upset that I made up to and I set it up to be an upset. I like the upset set up combination. It's like I'm untying or cutting one of those ropes, but we have no idea how many ropes there are, but there's probably a goodly number. Otherwise we would just be airborne. But I think not only do we have no idea how joyous the ultimate experience of the atonement is, and that liftoff. Of course, says, I like the phrase, the glad astonishment that for all this you gave up nothing. That we're really getting, and as we forgive the grievances, we're letting go of our attachments and specialness identifications with nothing. And each one of those just like severs a rope, and we feel maybe a little movement. But I think it's another ego tactic or strategy to say, well, gee, shouldn't I be airborne yet? Like a little kid in the backseat, are we there yet? Mm-hmm. But there was a talk that Jeff Seibert, Foundation for A Course in Miracles, that is carrying on the work of Ken Wapnick, said in probably 2 or 3 of his talks that I listened to. And I thought it was a really interesting point that that as we're working toward a realization of non-duality, that to look at our resistance gently and kindly and patiently, and realize that, and this also is reflected in one of the things that Ken Wapnick said, is that the 3 parts of the mind, the ego, the Holy Spirit, and the decision maker, are all in fully 100% in everyone. And so that when we're an ego 100%. It's not like the ego diminishes over time, but the time that we spend in it diminishes over time.
Yeah.
And I think that's the saving grace, is we more quickly realize, oh, this is, this way madness lies. This is nuts. If I keep going in this direction, which is 100% insane, I'm not going to be at peace. And we learn more quickly to say, okay, I'm cutting that rope. and then we feel a little bit of movement to the basket. But I think being patient and recognizing that, until we really complete the course, and we have no idea how many years or lifetimes that might take, we'll probably still, have some ego stuff keep coming up, and just being willing to notice that as we're draining the oceanic swamp, It takes a while, but every time it's just a little easier, isn't it? So.
It is. And what I've learned to do lately, and it's brought so much peace, is when I see this as a character in the dream, when she's having a hissy fit or grieving or whatever she's feeling, I just look at it and go, well, that's not me and that's not mine. And I don't own it. And getting to that place of not owning any of the feelings or thoughts or even body sensations or any parts of the personality has really set me free, because I used to be like a lot of other people and try so doggone hard to forgive everything and be a better person and all that. Well, that's an endless task. So just looking at it and watching it and naming it for what it is, and knowing I have accepted atonement for myself. I have accepted that I am the Holy Son of God himself, and so is everybody. And I remind myself, it's not that I have to accept atonement down the road. I've already done it. And just keep reminding myself. So that took away this ego quest for enlightenment and brought a lot of peace.
Yeah, I think that ties in nicely with the quote in the course of, do not fight yourself. The admonition to just notice when you're, anything that is putting up a fight is necessarily got to be part of that crazy thought system,
right?
Of duality. I mean, what could there be but a dualistic approach that would want to fight anything? What's all encompassing? Perfect oneness has no opposite. Yeah, that to me is one of those things that, I mean, the more we ponder that, the more it's like, oh yeah, that's right. That's where the ultimate peace has to be, in that pure non-dual understanding that no one's left out, nothing's left out. And I like how you mentioned that, that it's not a pantheistic thing where it's like, I just have to accept everything, of all the objects in the dream of space-time, from quarks to quasars and everything in between. It's like, well, I suppose maybe, in some aspects, but really the idea is to just notice whenever I'm upset about anything, or have the least little judgment or comparative kind of thing where that comparison upsets my peace. It's like, oh, if I'm making a big deal about something being different instead of the same, then I'm shattering that perfect oneness in my mind, and that's not necessary. It's I need do nothing to to make duality real.
Right.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Another way that the Course is different than other paths is that it says that there's truth or illusion. And I like to use the hands, and there's no compromise between the two. And it says this over and over. Whereas most paths try to spiritualize the illusion and make it holy, and God created it, and let's do all that. And there's nothing wrong with that. But it's not the same as recognizing absolute truth, formless, changeless. And so that's why the Course is a direct path, because like what you were just saying, you can recognize that you're in the ego thought system and you're either here or you're here. And it is a decision right in the middle of which one do you want to be in. And that's why it's so direct. It's like, oh, I feel like crap. I must be in the ego thought system. Guess what? I'm choosing again. I know I'm the Holy Son of God. And then it just gets faster and faster and faster. And you spend less and less and less time over here and know that you're here. You actually know that you're home with God, and you get to the place where you are walking the world, but you know that you're home with God, appearing to walk the world. Because there's a line in the Course that talks about the teacher of God not only knows he's not a body, he knows he's not in a body. And that one has really helped me. That's in the manual number 12. And when I realized I'm not even in a body, because again, the appearance of death is so profound that's been one of my biggest teachers. So when a partner of mine died a number of years ago, I was walking down the street and I'd say, we went here together and we went here together. And I could feel him going, where am I? And I'm going, well, you're with God. And he goes, no. We are in the same place. And it was like talking to him that trained my mind of, wait a minute, I'm mind, I'm with you in mind. I'm not here on the physical earth while you're in heaven or wherever you might be. We are together now. And that was another way that it brought it home into my being. So that, again, walking through this world is much easier than it used to be when I would struggle with things.
Yeah. And I think sometimes those primary relationships can be really great classrooms. And one example that came to mind as you were sharing that one, it was about a decade or so ago, actually a little more than that. It made sense for where my wife and I were at in terms of our livelihoods and so forth, for her to take a temporary job in California when we were living in Southern Oregon. And so she had packed up the car and was all set to go to, it would end up being about a year and a half. And we'd, get together every few weeks. So it wasn't like it was a total isolation thing. But I realized, that the morning that she was ready to drive to California, she was lying asleep next to me in bed. And I was realizing I was missing her already. And I was like, wait a minute, how could that be? And then this little light bulb moment is like, oh, where does she exist? And then if I can remember to extrapolate that to everyone, including people that I seem to have lost, on this level. And it's like, no, everyone is always in my mind. And then an exercise in looking at the projections and realizing, and in my more lucid moments, I remember to do that more frequently. Mm-hmm. But that recognition of the pulling back the projection is kind of like, lesson 5. I'm never upset for the reason I think. I think it's because there's something out on this dream screen with dream figures and dream characters, of which I appear to be one, is, these things seem to be happening in a pretty photorealistic holographic movie. And yet maybe it's just a fabricated, projected dream that I could not that I stop behaving in appropriate ways, but I don't have to identify with the idea that our shared identity, everyone's shared identity, all-inclusive shared identity, could never go anywhere. It couldn't be lost. It couldn't be compromised.
Yeah. And I love the title of Gary Renard's third book. I think it's Love Has Forgotten No One. Because when we exclude anybody, we don't feel good.
Right.
That hurts to exclude anyone, even someone you think you hate. Yeah. It hurts to exclude people.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And that's true not only for life partners, family members, coworkers, crazy drivers on the interstate, politicians that we love to hate, or hate to love, or the whole gamut. But even I'm just trying to notice more and more as just like even on Zoom meetings, course Zoom meetings, of which I attend a lot, just seeing if I think of anyone that's on the screen, let alone in a grocery store or walking down the street, if I see anyone as different or less than all of perfect spirit. That was another exercise that, since you mentioned Gary Renard, that in his Fearless Love audio, he had a little exercise in there that really I thought was brilliant. Was if I can remember that everyone I meet is not just part of spirit, part of the totality, but the pure non-dual totality, the wholeness of spirit, then I'm making that same assessment of myself. And that's what I think Holy Spirit wants us to do, is to just keep coming back to that place in the mind where it's like, oh yeah, I'm all a spirit, you're all a spirit, everyone is that whole enchilada. And from that perspective, nothing's lacking, and there's no need, there's no longing in that awareness. But the only thing that we really long for is to return to that awareness, I guess you could say, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And that would be when there's no need. Only the ego thinks it has needs. And what happens with the courses, it says, when you pay attention to your one function, which is forgiveness, true forgiveness of the world, not forgiveness of you did something wrong, so I'm forgiving you because you're a jerk and I'm better than you, but true forgiveness, which says this is a dream, and in a dream, nothing ever happened. But when we pay attention to our one function of true forgiveness, waking up, accepting atonement, all of our needs will be met. And I've seen that happen over and over and over in my life, where I've listened to spirit, gone out on a limb financially or whatever, and miracles happen. And so we do walk the world in peace when we accept that we're actually not really walking the world, we just appear to be.
Yeah, and sometimes things seem to go the way we want them to go to, and sometimes they don't. But I think that the crucial difference is that we get upset less and less because we don't identify with the outcomes and the expectations.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And a good example is this whole coronavirus thing. I mean, it's not going the way any of us would want it to. But and I've learned a lot of lessons from it in terms of letting go of separation and division and judgments. But I'm at peace in spite of it. And that is the miracle, because I would not have been in the past.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great example. And like you say, sometimes things arise even on the level of form that compensate. There's sort of silver linings. I think just the mechanism we're using right now, Zoom, being able to connect with family and friends around the planet in ways that certainly a large percent of the planet probably would have never even thought of a year and a half ago, that now is just kind of everyday stuff. And the connections that have been made and the friendships that have been deepened, and the comfort and the solace, as well as just fun and connecting with people all over this crazy dream of world has been facilitated by just some of those technologies. But it's not the technology, it's really, getting back to Plato, it's really the idea that we're all connected, and these technologies really just simply give form to that decision in our mind, don't they? Yeah.
And you said something earlier about when we wake up to God's love, or when we see the grandeur of God's love, or, and the thing about that is I've come to realize I have no clue what that is. Yeah. That the love that we feel here, just the grandest love you might feel for your baby, or you might feel for your spouse, or someone that you love, or your pet, is nothing compared to what awaits us. And the Course says we really can't even conceive of it. And that has helped me, because when it says you cannot even conceive of creation in the world, the closest you can come to it is true forgiveness. And that's in lesson 192. And true forgiveness means none of this ever happened and it's not even there. So it's like, that's the closest we could conceive of creation. It's like all the creation we think of, like of buildings or symphonies, or the creation of a baby in a mother's womb or whatever, we can't even conceive of the abstract love of God. And so I've kind of let go of trying to figure that out, and just gotten into this place of trust because of seeing all the changes in my life as I've accepted what the Course tells me. It says your one responsibility is to accept atonement for yourself. That is that the dream never happens. You've never left God. You're the holy, perfect child of God. The ego voice in me always says, you are just checking out of reality. You are living in fairy tale land. You're sitting on your butt doing nothing. You are just as crazy as a loon. If I didn't have all the concrete, form changes in my life, I would think I was absolutely nuts. But my life is unbelievably loving and beautiful, no matter what appears to be going on. That's why I accept what the Course is telling me.
Yeah. That idea that we have no clue. It's actually very encouraging idea. The idea of cluelessness and being willing to be wrong is I think a really huge part of the willingness that the Course talks about. And I like to think of my understanding as is not to demean oneself, but to just kind of notice how much in A Course in Miracles the author kind of lampoons our silly notion about understanding anything. We still think our understanding is important and a valuable contribution to the truth. I think it says somewhere.
Yeah,
and it's like that's pretty crazy. But that's kind of like a water molecule in the ocean saying, "Yeah, I think I've got this ocean figured out." and worse yet, we're a water molecule that's hallucinating a barrier around our own molecule, and then we think there's another barriers around smaller groups of water molecules that we think we like, and then there's those other water molecules that we don't like, and it's just nuts, but we're all pretty clueless, and these little, but because our minds are so powerful, we've dreamt up these little dark shells around our molecules and our groups of molecules that seem pretty real. I mean, we've got gender, political, ethnic, ideological, economic. Just pick any kind of polarization you can think of, and boy, we've got them 6 ways from Sunday, don't we? Just all the different kind of variations that we can think of the things that we think, oh, that's worthy of elevation or condemnation or whatever, and
yeah.
How clueless can we be?
Yeah.
And,
one of the things that made me believe the Course when I was first studying it, without all the proof that I have now, was it talked about projecting our world, and I had noticed that in my psychotherapy clients when I had an office and I was a psychotherapist, and they would have the same situations happen over and over and over in their life, and other people wouldn't have those. It was just, we all have our own individual dreams in the collective dream where we project things, and such weird things would happen that just could not happen. It shouldn't happen. Like, I had one client one time that got beaten up in a department store. Not once, twice, 2 different times. It's like, who gets beaten up in a department store? And so I mean, things like that.
It's not laughable, but it is kind of amusing.
Well, it's just so odd.
Yeah.
But you could see the same types of whatever pattern each person had repeated and repeated and repeated. And it's like, well, that could only happen in that person's dream because that's just weird. So talking about our minds being really powerful. Yeah. That's what made me realize we do project into our lives, and our minds are powerful, and we can make up anything we want. But the good thing is we can change our minds. We can change our mind and choose truth instead of the illusion that we've chosen and made up.
Yeah. And that kind of leads me to another Course cliche, I guess you could say. Another favorite quote of, our one remaining freedom as a prisoner of this world is our power to choose against the ego, to choose against duality. And that is really, that's worth celebrating. That's the happy inevitability, as opposed to the ego's morbid, terrifying inevitability that it promotes as its propaganda. The inevitability that we're going to wake up to the idea that if we've never been a specific separate self, or sometimes I like the acronym s.s.s.s, silly seemingly separate self. If we've never been that, then there's the only thing that, as the Course curriculum has been called, is undue curriculum. It's not a course in yes, it's a course in not no. We just have to say no to ego's denial of truth, and it's insane idea that we would ever have been limited by specifics.
Yeah. Yeah. And you had mentioned earlier not knowing and the don't know mind. And that's where the course is very similar to Zen.
Mm-hmm.
Zen talks about the don't know mind before thought appears.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a line in the course that says the most important thing to know is that you do not know.
That's a good foundation. Yeah. The empty cup beginner's mind kind of thing. Huh? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's
And
the little willingness, I suppose, would be analogous in the course jargon.
yeah, the willingness to turn over what you think you know
Mm-hmm.
to the higher mind, which of course calls the Holy Spirit. Yeah. And another thing, when you talk about this silly seeming separate self, some non-dual paths say that, you're the dream figure, you're just being lived, you have no free will whatsoever. And the thing about that is it's yes and no on that. It's both and. It's in the ego thought system. We are characters, we are puppets. The ego thought system of time and space, the course says, was over long ago. And we're just watching a movie, a journey that's already ended because we really truly are home. But even within this, the course gives us some hope. It says you still have the power of decision. So what you said about our one remaining freedom in this dream is the power of choice. Some of these other non-dual things say, well, you don't have any choice about anything, so just don't worry about it, let go, surrender, blah, 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 which leaves the ego feeling absolutely bereft and hopeless, like, well, now what? So I love how the course bridges that and says that because we are mind and we've always retained our mind of God within us, we still can choose. Yep. So I just feel like for me, the course has bridged a lot of different paths in a way that has, like I said earlier, answered all of my questions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. That willingness and freedom to choose against the insanity and just say, not struggling against it, not hurling nuclear warheads or even rotten tomatoes at the ego, just say, if it's not there, I don't have to make a big deal. And the not know is a very, very quiet, gentle practice, isn't it? Just say, oh, when the light bulb moment happens, it's like, oh, that's right. I don't have to give this energy. I don't have to invest my identity in what never was. Yeah.
Right. And I remember I had a Christian Science practitioner a number of years ago, and I told her about something that I felt very guilty about, that I felt I had hurt another person. And her immediate response was, it never happened. And that's what the Course in Miracles says. It never happened. But of course, I listened to that. You know how you read these things, you listen to it, but it goes right over your head and you go, yeah, but you don't get it at all. You think you get it, but you don't. So when she said that to me, it never happened. It was like, oh, and that's again where she said that about 8 years or so ago, but I didn't get that it never happened until my first husband dropped his body, or appeared to drop his body because he was never born, that it never happened. We were never married. We never had a child. But the ego wanted to hold on to the story. Oh, we were in love and we had a baby. It's like a lot of when you get to where it sinks in is you're letting go of your ego stories and you're really accepting it was a dream that never happened. And boy, oh boy, that for me, pushing through that, it never happened. Like, what do you mean it never happened? But pushing through it and saying, I want truth above all else. It just shifted everything.
Yeah. And that never happened. I think it's one of those easy things as course students to get into that level of confusion trap again of thinking that, oh, we're not denying on this level of the dream that, historical things, or science or anything that kind of stuff. We're just denying that the whole thought system could possibly be our reality. And that's, I think, the crucial distinction, because the course is never about behavior or changing things, right, or saying, Columbus didn't sail across the ocean, or
Oh yeah, it's not
Genghis Khan didn't go conquering, things in Asia. It's not about denying on that level. It's just saying that on the level that is important, that anything involving space and time couldn't have possibly impacted our real identity. And I think that's where the Course's forgiveness is so unique, in that it's not about forgiving something that happens. It's about forgiving something that didn't happen in truth,
right.
while still acknowledging on the level of form, sure, all kinds of crazy things happen. I mean, and all kinds of, we're, quote, guilty, unquote, of doing all kinds of crazy stuff in the world. But those are dream figures. and dream figures should, do what dream figures do and try to be the best dream figures they can. But that's not our identity. And eventually we get bored with the stories. And I like how you said, looking at the stories, because it also reminded me of a story that I was sharing, and now I'm sharing that story again. I guess ironically, of when I had given a talk for a conference in Sedona, Arizona. 2004, I guess it was. It was at this conference, and I got to know several of the people there, and on my way back from there, the fellow had an extra bedroom, and I stopped there, and they gave me breakfast and everything before I went on my way across the Nevada desert. Then a few years later, they came to visit, and I was showing them around the foothills of Northern California, where I'd spent a couple of decades. And as I was showing them around, I was doing what would, be appropriate for somebody new to the area. I was kind of showing all the historical landmarks and tourist points of interest, things like that. And while I was doing that, it was and talking about, things that I'd done in these different places. And I was realizing I was totally bored with my own story about all these places and things. But I didn't try to make it sound like, oh, you won't want to hear about this. I was just kind of noticing how I was going on about this stuff, and I was like, yeah, and so what? But it was just kind of an interesting observation where, I think at some point we hear our own stories, and it was like, okay, and so because we know that there's something more. It's like the drop realizes, yeah, but there's this ocean thing that I keep hearing about, and I know that there's something really much better in this ocean than this little drop thing I'm limiting myself to. So,
yeah. And one of my friends made a really interesting observation. She was talking about her parents, who have both passed on. And she said, I don't miss my parents. How can I miss my parents? I am my parents. They are me. We are one. She goes, I miss the stories I had around my parents.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But where do those live, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, actually, that reminds me of something. One more little Course quote that I see if I can find it real quick. It's in chapter 5 of the text. I'm going to go to the treeware version because I think I've got it bookmarked here. Let's see if I can find it quickly here. It's the what could you not accept? I think, is that the one? No, it's actually similar to that. Oh, here it is. It's on page 83. That's why I've got the bookmark there. This is in chapter 5, section 4, paragraph 8. In fact, this is a very frequent meditation for a study group that I attend weekly, with a tip of the hat to the lady who reads this. Terry, thank you. How can you who are so holy suffer? All your past except its beauty is gone, and nothing is left but a blessing. I have saved all your kindnesses and every loving thought you ever had. I have purified them of the errors that hid their light and kept them for you in their own perfect radiance. They are beyond destruction and beyond guilt. They came from the Holy Spirit within you, and we know what God creates is eternal. You can indeed depart in peace because I've loved you as I love myself. You go with my blessing and for my blessing. Hold it and share it, that it may always be ours. I place the peace of God in your heart and in your hands to hold and share. The heart is pure to hold it, and the hands are strong to give it. We cannot lose. My judgment is as strong as the wisdom of God, in whose heart and hands we have our being. His quiet children are his blessed sons. The thoughts of God are with you. Anyway, I always like that one just because it it reminds me that all the things that we think we're going to miss, giving up water moleculehood, if that's the metaphor. No, everything that's worthwhile and truly eternally valuable, we, as we develop that trust, we realize we're not giving up anything.
Exactly.
We're giving up nothing to gain everything. Yeah. So.
Yes. We're giving up the idea of separation and death to gain everything. And I often put that quote or part of that quote you just read in sympathy cards that I send. If they're course students who understand that we are ideas or thoughts in the mind of God, because every loving thought is eternal. So your loving thought about your loved one who has dropped the body is eternal. You cannot be separated. And you can tell if you're in the ego thought system or the Holy Spirit's thought system, because if you're in truth, you know that you're closer to them than you ever have been.
Exactly.
Once not even once, especially once the body has dropped, you are closer than ever. And that was a big surprise to me when that happened.
Yeah. And that closeness isn't something that we can lose, because our real nature is, if it's beyond space and time, I'm going to quote Richard Bach now. This is from Jonathan Siegel, which I have a fond place for that book and his Illusions book from years ago. But it's overcome space and all we have left is here, overcome time and all we have left is now, and in the middle of here now, don't you think we might see each other once or twice, kind of thing. And that's basically the reminder that our real identity couldn't possibly be limited to anything that's separate. How could it be? And the challenge, of course, with that is to recognize that that's true for everyone we meet, whether it's people we think of or encounter in form. It doesn't make any difference because it's all projection anyway, right? So,
Right. Well, and the Course has a quote about the here and now. It says, atonement might be equated with total escape from the past and total lack of interest in the future. Heaven is here, there is nowhere else. Heaven is now, there is no other time.
Yeah.
And that's the manual number 24.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Where else could we go, huh?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, where else? And so it's that's the bridge also with many paths that recommend meditation, because when you get to meditation and stopping or not stopping or just watching the thoughts or the mind becomes quiet, that's where you are. You're in the here and now, you're in the present moment, and that is God. That is that peace that,
Yeah. I find it helpful sometimes to imagine the ego thoughts throughout the day are sort of like this director's cut ticker tape that's got the closed caption on the DVD. And I can turn the volume up on it if I want to pay attention to that. But I can also, not that there's a knob on most, it's up and down arrows, but I can turn the volume down on that insane director's cut commentary. And that's I think what we get by listening to Holy Spirit's quiet rebuttal of ego's insanity that just says, nothing happened.
Right.
You need do nothing about this drivel that's going across the screen of your mind. Yeah.
And also when you say nothing happened in what you were saying earlier, it doesn't mean that we deny that Columbus sailed across the ocean or that Hitler, exterminated 6 million Jews. We're not denying history or denying that there's such a thing as coronavirus or things like that. Right. But I just lost it.
Well, it's probably something to do with we're denying the ego's interpretation, right, of those things.
The ego's interpretation, and I just lost it. It's something that it's like you're able to act in the world and just do what needs to be done, but you know that it's just not that important or whatever. You don't take things seriously. But I'm losing it. There was another point, and I can't remember now.
Not to worry. I think we've all done that quite a lot, and I think that's part of how we just need to be really patient, because our egos put up an enormous fight, and that's where the resistance, is something
Okay,
that
I
we.
remember what it is.
Okay, there we go.
So lesson five says I'm never upset for the reason I think. Lesson 6 says I'm upset because I see something that is not there. The manual number 8 says the body's eyes will still see other bodies. They will see sick bodies. They will see healthy bodies, but a healed mind will lump them all into one category or another, truth or illusion, which all form is illusion. But we see the Christ in everyone and everything.
Yeah.
So the healed mind still operates in this world. It's not like my body's eyes don't see what's going on. They do. I just, in my mind, I know the truth beyond appearances.
Yeah. That's really important too. There's just, I like to also use the idea that, because I sort of grew up with a scientific background. With my dad was a cyclotron supervisor, so I got all kinds of physics stuff, and really I kind of grew up in that kind of community. So I kind of think of, well, okay, the photons that hit the retina, and sort of like pixels, on a screen. We don't deny the ones and the zeros that are hitting the sensory data. We just deny the ego's interpretation of that, twisting and turning, as the Course puts it, to make it into something that's worthy of judgment. And if we see that everything that our little water droplet mind on ego's drug interprets is going to distort and twist and obfuscate and hide the anything that smacks of the greater reality, we can just be gently, patiently observant of that resistance and say, okay, that'll pass. And whether it takes the form of, and I can certainly relate, is you read something in the Course, and then 5 milliseconds later, it's like, no, what was that? even though if I was reading something else, I could maybe remember it for a day or a week, but I think there's things that maybe we're not quite ready for. I'll speak for myself that, it's like certainly that, coming back to the things that Gary Renard's book reminded me, I was like, oh, I was reading the Course for a decade and a half, and it's like, how did I miss that? Some of these key ideas, well, I wasn't ready for them.
Right.
Yeah.
And we just have to be gentle, and the Course does say it's a gentle awakening.
Yeah.
It doesn't hurl us into reality. We just gently, because the thing about accepting that, never born, never died, it never happened. It was all stories in my mind, even though, like, there's a marriage certificate, a birth certificate, even though that does appear in a seeming external reality. It took me 8 years. I got a glimpse of it when my father passed. And then it wasn't until 8 years later, when my first husband passed, that it sunk in, because I remember seeing it when my father passed, and I went, and then it scared the hell out of me, and I couldn't touch it again for that. I just couldn't. It's like everything I've ever experienced was really a dream, really, really, really a dream. It was too much.
Yeah. And, that's kind of ties into that one of the more challenging ideas, but the really rewarding one in the Course. And it's in the late hundreds, I forget which number, but, the one that says, there is no world. This is the central thought the Course attempts to teach.
Yeah.
And then we'll each come to that, probably over and over again, until we begin to accept the depth and breadth of that idea, and realize, oh yeah, there's really nothing here that is holding me to a very dysfunctional dream, or can
Right.
points at it calls it a maladaptive solution to a non-existent problem.
Yeah, and at the
Yeah.
beginning of that lesson, that 132, it talks about what keeps the world in chains except your beliefs about it.
Yeah.
And that's what we do see as we keep forgiving our illusions and forgiving our special attachments and getting, disidentified with the ego self. We can see our world keeps shifting and changing, and there's just more peace, and there's more love, and there's more harmony. And there could, like you said earlier, there could be bad things happen, but you're at peace watching it. So yeah, there is no world. And I remember being in a course group one time where I was a visitor, and I said something. I said, well, lesson 132 says there is no world. And the leader went, oh, don't say that. You're scared. You're going to scare people away. And then I realized, well, wait a minute. Lesson 1 is nothing I see means anything. And by lesson 14, you have, God did not create, or some, I forget what lesson 14 says, but it says, God did not create that plane crash, therefore it is not real. I mean, right in the first lessons, it's saying right out there, 6, I see something that's not there. So, I mean, the course just smacks you right between the eyes. And I think it's why most people can't get past lesson 20 in the course, because they're like, what?
Yeah, and that's okay. Because we'll come back to it, right? Yeah. I think 14 is God did not create a meaningless world. So,
okay, thank you.
That's yeah. But like you say, those early workbook lessons, right from the get-go, there's pretty potent insights there that keep reminding us that we're making this whole thing up. It's just a fabricated little water droplet dream that is forgivable. And that's, I think, where the sweetness comes in, is we realize it's like, oh yeah, it's a dream, but it's a forgivable dream, and I can afford to let myself and everyone else off the hook by just noticing systematically with devotion, dedication, and very gentle vigilance that I can keep looking and looking with Holy Spirit, in my mind, and seeing that no matter what seems to be happening, there's an innocence and a call for love, even if it's not an expression of love in any given moment. Yeah.
Right. And then the innocence is, we're all bozos on this bus, right?
Yeah, really. Yeah. We definitely are clowns on our shenanigans with playing with dream stuff. So anyway.
We are, yeah. And that is the beautiful thing, is that judgment just does fall away, because when you know that everyone is a character in the dream, they're just playing out their script, they're playing out their role. Nobody's done anything wrong. And, again, relatively, we don't want the level confusion. There are bad things that happen here, but in the ultimate scheme of things, nobody's done anything wrong, and it just helps so much. I mean, it takes away the separation and the judgments and the divisions and the hatred, and I watch so many of like on the news and all the division, and I'm just I can't go there anymore.
Yeah, another tool I find helpful when I remember to use it is to think of everyone else is already home, and I'm the only one that's skipping class. And everyone's just waiting for me to join the party, and if I can just do that more and more consistently, I won't be the least bit concerned about anyone else's classroom, because if I realize that's like, well, okay, first of all, if I'm upset by anything, it's because my projection is getting involved, and then I need Holy Spirit's help to heal that projection. But then again, the non-dual idea that I've never left, no one else has ever left, but maybe a training wheel idea that could be helpful is, if everyone else is already home, then I'm the only one who needs to finish the journey without distance.
And the course would validate that, because it says, it only takes one, and if the one mind is dreaming that it's Bruce, and Bruce thinks he's separate, it's only you that can change your mind and say, I'm not Bruce after all. I am home with everybody else, right?
Right. So you're off the hook, Lorri. It's all on me. There you go. Very good. Well, this has been a lot of fun. We've gone for about an hour, I think, maybe a little more. This great fun romp through some of the courses, metaphysics and the non-duality. And anything else you want to share? I mean, we could certainly go on for quite some time, but I want to honor your time as well. The dream of time, that is.
Yeah. Dream of time and space. It's over. No, I think that's good.
Okay. Very good.
Okay.
Again, you can find Lorri's work on lorricoburn.com. That's LORRICOBURN.com. And I'll be posting this conversation on ACIMblog.com shortly. So thanks again, Lorri, and look forward to our next conversation.
Okay. Thanks, Bruce. All right.
Thank you.
Take care. All right. Bye-bye.